How's it going, everyone?
Good, honestly. So how's that Prosecco last night?
I enjoyed the glass very much. Just the glass.
So what's the? I know we all kind of noticed that you had them doing all this stuff without shoes on and just doing it in socks. What's the idea? What's that
Right.
accomplish?
So it's something called differential learning. So it comes from a professor called Wolfgang Schöllhorn, German. So I first came across this stuff about 6 years ago. I read a paper, and it was he's done some really good research papers. It really challenged my thinking because I grew up thinking, oh, there's one way to shoot. The ball has to be in this here, like what we're all taught. And then I read the research, and it basically went against like everything I'd learned until that point. So essentially, the idea of this differential learning approach is it's exaggerated variability. So what we're doing is in the prime example is the shot M made at the end of the second half, where she turned over her inside shoulder and made a fading three. So the idea of differential learning is we're doing things which we're not going to do in the game. But what it does is it makes us more adaptive, so that when you have to adapt to something like a defender closing out quickly, or you catch the ball in a weird spot, you've got the solution space to actually find your functional movement solution. So it's a big part of the program here. We're doing it all the time, and especially the day after the game. I think you saw like the benefit from a movement capacity. Like, how can we restore their degrees of freedom so that they can move as efficiently, optimally as possible the next game, and it's going to be a big part of that.
And people who've been around basketball practices, they're used to hearing whistles. And there's no whistles out there. It's I can't do it, but other people can do the hand whistle thing. What is the approach there?
It's really interesting that you picked up on it. It's more I like getting them used to the voice, and I think it's really interesting. I think a lot of things in sports like maybe come over from the military. So I think that's one where it's like the idea of drilling and the use of the whistle. I was like, I want this to be more of a joyful environment, and I just don't like using the whistle because of the control it connotes, and it's more just using voice, and I think it's just a nicer tone for the practice.
For sure.
Yeah.
And when you have players who are going through personal trials, as Sarah Ashley is, how important is it to have that holistic approach to practice where they don't feel like it's militaristic?
It's so important. I just had a really nice catch up with SA, and just it's all about the environment we're trying to create here every day, and the confidence we have in the people and the building. And I think it's when something challenging like that comes up, obviously I want all the players and staff to feel like they're supported here, and we're doing things the right way.
Thoughts on getting Holly back?
Yeah, great. I think I don't know if you guys had a chance to check out her last preseason game. Did some really interesting things. Get steals, so you see the link there with what we're trying to do defensively. I think just gives us some good versatility at the wing. So excited to get a look at her.
Do you have much of a relationship with her?
I wasn't actually on the on the coaching side, so paths crossed a little bit. Funny story was many years ago, Holly was on the England junior team with my sister, so that was about 7 years ago. But that's our paths didn't cross directly at the Lions.
What's your sister up to now? She's still playing? Or?
She's training to be a detective in just south of London.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
There was a noticeable difference in the physicality in last night's game. How do you remain physical but also get a hold of some of those fouls?
Really interesting point. I do think I think we're seeing it even out, especially after how it started in preseason. I thought we did a really good job overall in terms of the physicality, especially in terms of how we were guarding like their top players, in terms of pushing the boundaries without getting those foul calls. But I still think there's some improvements we can make in particular areas. So it's definitely going to be a focus of ours. I think the most important thing was the physicality on the rebounding side. That was much better. That's something we've got to, every game, like this next 10-game stretch, we've got to keep hammering that home.
Can you describe the connectivity that you've seen throughout the roster and just the trust that you have to be able to go that deep into your roster, into the rotation?
So we actually showed our players the minutes today in the film when we started, and that was the messaging. We're 14 deep here, and I think for me it's a big part of the philosophy here in terms of trusting the bench. Because also if we want our players to develop, like they have to play, and I think it's really hard for the players to feel like you trust them if you're playing 7 players. So I think that's a key part of our DNA in this first year. And there will be some games where it might hurt us, but for the long term, we're going to get far more benefits out of it. And I think too, we're doing some interesting things with the physical data in terms of how we're tracking like the intensity jumps, excels, decels, and for us to sustain, what we're doing on both ends of the floor. It's essential that we actually play 10, and I think it aids in things like today with a recovery day because we can actually get out and do a little bit because players haven't played more than like 32 minutes a game. BC led it, and then we didn't have a single player over 25 minutes. So for long-term health, longevity, that's really important.
Can you walk us through that moment in the locker room right after the game when you're like, I've never had a game like this in my life? What was that like?
It was so special. I mean, it was so many different things. I think it might have been the loudest game that I've ever had the privilege of coaching in. Like it was deafening in a good way, and it was just my heart was thumping in those last 2 minutes. But then just seeing we watched the game back this morning as a staff, and just seeing all the time when the fans are on their seats supporting us, cheering us. But walking into that locker room, it was an incredible feeling.
It seems pretty clear that you have the playing buy-in, but based on what Sarah Ashley's saying, you have the emotional buy-in also. How does that feel like as a coach right now?
Oh, it's honestly it gives me a lot of joy to hear players talking about that, because I think it's the basketball is obviously a big part of it, but I think it's always they're not necessarily going to remember in 3 years like what our principles were of how we played against the switch or how we defended with our full court defense. It's what they are going to remember is how we made them feel and what it felt like to be coached by me. And I think that to me is, I think a lot of times in pro sports, we go for performance, but then the whole humanistic element, the transformational side completely falls off a cliff. And I think I really want to show here how we can achieve high performance, but then be elite from the humanistic perspective in terms of the working relationships we're creating and the type of environment where every single player on a roster wants to be here. They want to come back every year, and they say this is a special place to be. And I think for me, success, if at the end of this year, everyone says we're a resounding yes, I want to be in Portland for the long-term future, this is the place I want to be, then that to me is honestly more important than any play or X's and O's scheme I can draw up. Thank you, everyone.